This should not exist, but it does. An animal built like a wolf, buried among wolves, feared like a wolf. And for more than a century, almost everyone agreed it was simply a larger, heavier version of the same bloodline. But when scientists finally reached inside its bones and read its ancient DNA, the result did not confirm the story. It erased it. Because the dire wolf, the most iconic predator of Ice Age North America, was not what it seemed. Not a gray wolf ancestor. Not even a close cousin. Something else. Something far older. And the deeper researchers looked, the less this animal fit anywhere we expected. For a long time, the explanation felt simple. Dire wolves were thought to be the oversized cousins of modern wolves, shaped by a harsher world. That made sense. Their skeletons looked familiar. Broad skulls, powerful jaws, thick limbs built for impact. Thousands of their bones were pulled from the asphalt seeps of Brea, as if the continent itself had preserved a warning from the last ice age. They lived across North America until around 13,000 years ago, then vanished alongside mammoths, giant bison, and horses. A giant wolf for a giant world. It was neat. It was elegant. It was probably wrong. Because morphology can lie. Two animals can look almost identical and still be separated by millions of years of evolution. In biology, that happens when different lineages are forced by the same pressures into the same design, the same shape, the same weapons, the same role. And if that is what happened here, then the dire wolf was never a bigger gray wolf at all. It was a stranger wearing the same outline. That is where the real mystery begins. Not with what the dire wolf was, but with why evolution made it look so familiar, and hid just how distant it truly was. At first, the older theory held its ground, because it was built on something scientists had trusted for generations: the body itself. When paleontologists compared dire wolf bones to gray wolves and coyotes, the similarities seemed too strong to ignore. The teeth were canine. The skull carried the familiar architecture of a pack hunter. The body plan fit a predator designed to chase, seize, and crush large prey. So the classification followed the bones. Dire wolf became Canis Daris, a member of the same broader group as living wolves. The logic was clear. If it looks like a wolf, hunts like a wolf, and lived where wolves later thrived, then it must belong somewhere close to them. But even that tidy explanation had cracks. Dire wolves were heavier, more compact, more brutal in the head and jaw. Their snouts were shorter. Their teeth were thicker, better for cracking bone. Their bodies seemed tuned not just for pursuit, but for overpowering massive prey in an Ice Age landscape filled with bison, horses, camels, and juvenile mammoths. They looked less like endurance runners and more like specialists, hypercarnivores, predators committed to meat at a scale modern wolves rarely match. The question was whether those differences were just adaptation within the wolf family, or evidence of something more ancient. Then came the deeper problem. If dire wolves were so close to gray wolves, why did they disappear completely while gray wolves survived? Why leave behind no clear descendants? Why no obvious blending? No gradual transition? No genetic echo in the animals that replaced them? In paleontology, extinction can hide those gaps for a while. In genetics, it cannot. So, three possibilities began to emerge. One, dire wolves really were close relatives of gray wolves, just highly specialized, and ultimately outcompeted. Two, they were part of an older North American lineage that evolved in parallel-looking wolf-like, without being truly close. Or three, they were something even stranger. A population shaped by deep, hybrid ancestry, assembled from branches of the canid family tree that no longer exist in pure form. Each theory explained part of the puzzle. None explained all of it. The breakthrough arrived in 2021, and it came from a place bones alone could never reach. A team led by researchers including Angela Perry analyzed ancient DNA from dire wolf remains found in Wyoming, Idaho, Ohio, and Tennessee. Some samples were more than 50,000 years old. The expectation was modest. Clarify the wolf's place on the family tree. Measure the distance. Confirm what the skeletons had been suggesting all along. Instead, the genomes delivered a result so disruptive, it forced a rethinking of the animal from the ground up. Dire wolves, the study found, were not close relatives of gray wolves at all. Their lineage had split from the ancestors of living wolf-like canids, roughly 5.7 million years ago. That is not a minor separation. That is not a regional variation. That is deep time. Deep enough that gray wolves, coyotes, dholes, and African wild dogs all belong to a more recent story than the dire wolf did. In other words, the animal everyone had treated as an exaggerated wolf was actually the last visible member of a far older American line. And then came the detail that made the result even stranger. Dire wolves and gray wolves overlapped in North America for thousands of years. They hunted on the same continent. They occupied the same broad landscapes. Yet the data showed no meaningful gene flow between them. No real interbreeding. No genetic blending. Two predators built on similar lines living side by side and remaining biologically separate. That forced a new interpretation. The familiar body was a false clue. The broad skull, the massive jaws, the bone-crushing teeth, these were not inherited from a recent, common wolf ancestor. They had been built independently. Evolution had arrived twice at nearly the same answer. But that was only the first shock. Because once scientists proved the dire wolf was not a true wolf, in the modern sense, a more difficult question appeared behind it. If it was not part of the wolf family, we thought we knew, then what exactly was it made of? That question became sharper in 2025, when a new team working with higher quality ancient genomes pushed beyond the first revelation. Earlier studies had only recovered fragments enough to prove the dire wolf was distant, but not enough to fully reconstruct the machinery underneath. This time, researchers drew usable genomes from a 13,000-year-old tooth in Ohio and a 72,000-year-old inner ear bone from Idaho, using newer pangenomic methods designed for heavily damaged DNA. What they found did not reverse the 2021 result. It made it more complicated. Because the dire wolf was not simply ancient, it appeared to be assembled. One part of its genome seemed to come from a lineage related to the broader wolf-like canids, the branch that would eventually include gray wolves, coyotes, and dholes. But another substantial part traced back toward a much older and more obscure canid ancestry, closer to the deeper roots of the dog family tree. Not a recent hybrid, not a temporary mix. Something far older. A lineage that may have formed through hybrid speciation millions of years ago, then persisted long enough to become its own stable species. That changes the emotional shape of the story. The dire wolf was not just a lost predator. It may have been the surviving product of an ancient merger carrying genetic history from branches that no longer walk the earth. And still, the contradiction deepened. Its mitochondrial DNA pointed one way. Its nuclear genome told a more tangled story. Its body looked familiar. Its ancestry did not. Even now, no single theory closes every gap. Was it a relic of an old New World canid experiment? A hybrid lineage forged during a chaotic period of migration and separation? Or the final visible trace of a much larger family that vanished before we ever understood it? The answer, for the first time, was not simpler than the myth. It was stranger. The dire wolf did not just resemble the wrong animal. It may have been built from the ruins of multiple ones. And that is why this story now reaches beyond paleontology. Because once the genome was mapped, it did not stay in the past. It moved into the present. Companies like Colossal began using ancient dire wolf DNA as a blueprint, editing gray wolf cells at a small number of key genes tied to size, musculature, skull shape, and coat color. The result was not a cloned dire wolf. Even they do not claim that. It was something more unsettling than a resurrection, and more revealing than a replica of functional approximation. A living animal, shaped to recover parts of a vanished form. That raises an uncomfortable question. If a creature can be rebuilt from fragments, from selected traits, partial genomes, and informed engineering, what exactly are we bringing back? The animal itself? Its silhouette, its ecological role, or just our idea of what it meant? In the case of the dire wolf, the distinction matters because the science has already shown us how deceptive appearances can be. Looking like a wolf did not make it a wolf. Sharing most of the same DNA did not make it closely related. Similarity in this case was never identity. Imagine standing at Brea thousands of years ago hearing a pack call across open ground. You would probably know exactly what you were hearing. Or think you did. A wolf. A familiar shape in an ancient world. But the genome tells a colder story. Sometimes nature builds the same face twice, using different histories underneath. Sometimes an animal can dominate an entire continent and still leave no living descendant that truly explains it. That is what changes everything. Not just that the dire wolf was misclassified, but that one of the most recognizable predators in prehistory turned out to be a genetic outsider hidden in plain sight. And once you see that the lesson becomes larger than this one species. The past is not only stranger than we imagined. It is stranger precisely where it looked most familiar.